I want to welcome now someone who has staunchly defended President Trump and his tax cuts, but has had a somewhat different view on trade policy. He is David McIntosh, and he is president of the Club for Growth. Comes to us today from Washington. So, David, maybe some encouraging news on trade.
I think that's right. I'm delighted to hear two things. One, that the president is pushing for a deal. I think securing a better trade relationship with China is really important for our overall economy. The second is that he's willing to postpone that March 1st or March 2nd deadline about increasing tariffs from 15 to 25%. That's huge because imposing those tariffs would be a really severe blow to both our economy and to, frankly, China and the ripple effects around the world.
David, I wonder if the president may be paying attention to some of the numbers that we're getting in, because when he came to office, he said he wanted to be the jobs president, create more jobs than anyone else. And yet, in some areas, it's not clear that's happened. For example, in the steel industry, we put a graph up that shows actually steel jobs are down. They're not up, despite what he said about bringing steel industry back to the United States.
And we predicted that would happen. What you would do is increase the cost of steel as an input, but you're not going to create those jobs. We're not going to go back to the 1950s where steel plants hired, thousands of people to produce steel. Technology has taken us beyond that, and so it's not going to end up working. In fact, it kind of decreases the overall demand for steel when the price goes up.
And that's what we were just looking at, because in fact the efficiency's gone up just as the jobs have gone down. And as you say, if the price goes up, then that gives them new impetus to manufacturers, to people who run these companies, to say, let's get even more efficient. It doesn't go in the right direction.
No, so tariffs and any kind of attempt to manipulate the market that way end up backfiring. They end up imposing an overall net cost on society, both for the consumers and the producers. They're an ineffective method of trying to shape what kind of economy we have, and they're costly to our economy, to American citizens. Now, I understand the president is also thinking about them as more of a tool to force people to come to us with better trade agreements. We've kind of given him more leeway on that. But for example, now that we have this new North American treaty, let's get rid of the tariffs on steel and aluminum so we can go back to a more efficient economy.
Well, and as you say, the president is also trying to pursue some other things. He also is trying to pursue, for example, opening up markets. This morning he tweeted, "No final deal will be made until my friend President Xi and I meet in the near future to discuss and agree on some of the long-standing and more difficult points." Very comprehensive transaction. And he's talked about opening up the markets, for example, for financial services.
I think that would be good. I think if we can move the Chinese so they internally decide they want to have a more free market system in the sense of respecting property rights, opening up competition, and fewer emphasis on the state-run companies, all of that long-term is good for them and good for the world economy. It's a tough, tough nut to crack, but if that can be accomplished or even moved forward, that's a very worthwhile goal.
Does the president want or need or deserve more authority to get some of this done? Because there's a proposal, as you know, up on Capitol Hill to actually increase his trade authority, even though some congressmen and senators have some reluctance. In fact, I talked to Chuck Grassley, Senator Chuck Grassley, and he had some real reservations. This is what he said.
We give the president some authority to negotiate, but quite frankly, in the 74 legislation and the 1963 legislation, we've delegated too much authority, and I'm for curbing some of that authority.
So there you have it. Senator Chuck Grassley, a veteran of Capitol Hill, says we've gone too far as a Congress, as a Senate and a House. We should pull some back. Where do you stand?
Yeah, I agree with Senator Grassley, and it really comes down to looking at how our government should function. Tariffs ultimately are a tax, and Congress shouldn't cede the authority to raise taxes, whether they're called a tariff or some other kind of tax. He's right, they've ceded too much, and it needs to be the role of Congress to be engaged in this and approve it before the American people pay higher taxes. Ultimately, the reason people did it then and do it now is that Congress isn't all that functional. But the solution isn't to give more power to the president. The solution is for Congress to step up to the plate and do its job.
So finally, David, I mean, you are president of the Club for Growth, after all, and President Trump campaigned on really growth, pro-growth agenda of the United States, and he has certainly pursued that with some tax cuts that you supported, with some deregulation. On the other hand, some of the trade issues and some of the other things seem to point the other direction. Put it all together and look at 2019 for us. What sort of growth do you think we can anticipate for this country? We certainly were above trend last year in 2018.
And I'm still optimistic about 19 for a couple reasons. The tax cut will continue to have a beneficial influence. The president's continuing to reduce regulatory burdens. That's a huge impact that often doesn't get talked about. And then the Federal Reserve has signaled we may be slowing down on our effort to get back to a true price of money and a normal interest rate. And I think all of those combined should give us a continued growth throughout 19. Optimistic about it. And then the fact that the president's giving, stepping back from the hardliner, saying I'm tariff president, and now willing to negotiate, that's another good sign of optimism for the economy.
Okay.